Hello and welcome to Motion Graphics Basic Training. This is part 2 of a 6-part tutorial series where I'll be teaching you how to create this. In the last tutorial we went through the basics of Illustrator, what different tools do, and some important shortcuts. In this tutorial we'll be going through the basics of After Effects. I'm Arun Gopidas and let's get started. So this is where we left off last time, and we had made these 3 shapes and I had asked you to save this file, so I hope you still have it. Okay, so now let's fire up After Effects, which is where we learn the animation. So to start off with, this is the welcome screen that we get, and here are some of the recent projects that I've worked on, and for the purpose of this tutorial let's create a new project. And this is how the project looks like. So there are multiple windows, mainly 1, 2, 3 and 4. These 4 are the basic ones. And if your window doesn't look like mine, you just need to go to Window, Workspace and change it over here. So for this one, let's stick to animation. I think animation works for what we are going to do. And to start off things, we need to click on this button over here to create a new composition, or you can go to composition and new composition, and let's name this composition basic. And then we have the width and the height over here, which is set to 1920 by 1080, which is the frame size that we want. And then this is the frame rate, which tells us how many frames per second there would be. You could keep it at 23.976 or 24 or 25 or 30 or 60 depending on what we are trying to do, but for now we leave it at 23.976. and then start timecode, and the duration is important, so this tells you how long your file is going to be. You can change it later, but for now let's begin at 10. So this is 10 seconds and you click OK. So this is a composition that we've just created. Okay, so you don't have to follow along right now. I'll just show you quickly one very small animation so that you get to know what different things do in the window. So I've made a quick animation, which is a square going from left to the right. So what's interesting to notice is that this is a composition window and this is linked to my timeline. So at whatever time I am in, this will show me what's on my timeline. And this is the square that I have. So this square will also be in this. So this is our project window, which has all the things that we import and all the compositions we make. And this is the white solid that we have. So you put the white solid into the timeline so that we can animate it, and the composition window is there to see what we are animating. So now that we have got that out of the way, so for now we'll delete this, and now let's look at importing what we had made in the last tutorial. So how you do that is by clicking on File, Import and File, and then go to the location of that file, which is over here, and you can import as composition retain layer sizes. So this is very important, so make sure it's on composition retain layer sizes and then click open. So now you have the shapes inside After Effects. So the other way to import this would be just to double click inside the project window, and you can do the same thing to open it. So now that you have the shapes, I can double click the shapes, and now I can see that I can select whatever shape I want. So these are 2 different compositions right now. So either we can animate in this or we can animate in this. But for me, I think it's better if I copy all these 3, which I can press Shift and press on the last one and the first one, so it'll select all. Or I can go into this window and press Command A or Control A, or I can just control click all 3 and I can copy it and I can put it in my basic composition. So now this composition, which is 10 seconds long, has these three shapes in it. So it's written, its shapes is a star, square and circle, and it corresponds to the shape on the screen. Now let's come to animating. So we'll choose a circle and we'll hide the other two for now. So we can hide them by deselecting the eye over here. So now you only see the circle, and I can click and move it around at 0, 0. Also you can change this by pressing command clicking this, so you can either get the number of frames or you can get the number of seconds. So let's leave it at seconds. Control click is how you change this. Now I want this circle to move from here, point A to point B to point C to point D, and finally back to point A. So how I can do it is by using the position on this. So I have to press P on my keyboard to bring up the position parameters for this shape, and there's a small stopwatch next to it, and that records the position of the object. So at 0, 0, I'll click on the stopwatch. Make sure I have to click the stopwatch only once, and if I click it again, I'll end up deleting all the keyframes. So when I click on the stopwatch, there is a keyframe which is created over here. This small triangle, that's the keyframe. So that tells my software that at this place we have defined a position for the circle. So now we can probably move forward to say around 2 seconds. You can check the time here. Go to around 2 seconds and then click and drag it to your position number 2. Now what you can see is between this to 2 seconds, the circle changes from position 1 to position 2. You can go to 4 seconds and get the circle over here, and then go to around 6 seconds and get the circle over here, and then go to 8 seconds and change it back. So now we have the circle moving from point A to point B to point C to point D and finally to point E. So this is how you do that. So now the second thing I want to talk about is parenting. So what parenting means is that if I have another shape which I can now unhide, so I have this square. Now I want the square to move exactly the way the circle is moving, but I don't want to animate it again. So what I can do is I can click on this button and pick it to the first layer, which is already animated. So what this means is this square layer is a child of the circle. So the circle is a parent of the square, and now whatever the parent does, the child will also do. So you don't have to animate it twice, you can just animate it once and it can stick to that. And we can also have a third object which is parented to the first one also. It's again the same thing, you pick it and put it on the first layer, and now all three of them will animate together. So that's parenting. So now let's go on to something called rotation. So while this is moving, so whatever I do to the circle will also happen to the other two layers, but what I do to the child layers won't really happen to the parent. So what I mean by that is, now if I have to click on the square and I want it to have a rotation while it's going around, so I can click on R to bring up the rotation, and again I'll click on the stopwatch to add a keyframe, and I'll go to the end of my last keyframe where I'll probably want to stop the animation, and click on, so you can make a keyframe by using this as well. It'll create whatever value there is, or for this case I want it to be 360, so or a 1x, which means it's going to rotate 360 degrees while it goes from point A to point B to point C to point D. So now nothing else is rotating around the same axis apart from the square. And if I want the star also have a rotation, and I'll click on the stopwatch again, click on R to get the rotation and stopwatch to make a keyframe, and I'll go to the end, but now I'll add a -1. So our square moves forward and our star moves backwards. You can already start seeing what we can probably do with this. If you want to create a huge machinery or a chain, this could be the rotation that you apply to the gears so that they keep moving. So that's parenting. And the next thing that we need to know is anchor points. So anchor points are important. So I'll probably delete the first two. I'll click on the stopwatch again, so all the keyframes are gone. Now it's reset to its original place. Another thing that I like to do is to check if there are any keyframes already on this or not. I have to press U. So I press U on the keyboard. It tells me if there are any keyframes anywhere. So right now there are no keyframes, so it's a good place to start. And what I want to do is go to rotation again, and by pressing R, and then if I click and drag this, I can start seeing how we can rotate this. But right now it's rotating from the center. What if I don't want it to rotate from the center? Then I need to go into this pan behind tool, which is over here, and then go to the anchor point. So this is the anchor point of my star, and I can move it to some other position. So now when I try rotating, it's rotating around that axis. Now I can put it somewhere else and it'll rotate from there, or I can even put it anywhere and it'll rotate from that point. It can be further away and it'll rotate around that. You can imagine, if there's probably a sun in the center, this could be the earth. So it's probably revolving around the earth. So there are a lot of applications of this. So this is pretty important. So you get it by pressing on this tool and you can get it back. Also, you can click on this little triangle to get all the different values for this, and you can click on reset to get everything back to normal. And I think that should do it. The one other thing that I would want to tell you is that what's nice about this workflow is that between Illustrator and After Effects, you can keep jumping back and forth. So if I go back to Illustrator and open up the shapes, which is the same thing which I have imported over here. Now if I go into my star and say change the color of the star to a darker blue, and I save this file, now this changes will reflect in this. So if I have to change anything at some point, if I'm working on a project and the client wants some changes, it's easier to get changes done like this. Then you don't have to change your animation at all. So your animation remains exactly the same while the shape or the color or things in it can change. And that brings me to an end of tutorial 2. I hope you were able to follow along. The next part deals with how to make the final scene in Illustrator, and it drops very soon, so turn on your post notifications so that you don't miss out on the next one. And until then, just see what the software can do, explore around, and also consider subscribing to my YouTube channel if you liked this, and I'll see you very soon.